Today on this episode of the Brain Surgeon's Take, we will be discussing all things cannabis with Jamaican entrepreneur, former professional football player, and son of the legendary Bob Marley, Rohan Marley. Marijuana has already been legalized in many states and is becoming increasingly mainstream in our country. Listen up as we discuss this herb's past, present, and future with major financial and social implications. Much more on this podcast episode. Welcome back, everyone. Here's my take on Rohan Marley. He comes from a legendary family and is doing legendary things. Rohan is a true Renaissance man, academic scholar, professional athlete, and successful entrepreneur. I really enjoyed this interview as I got to learn all about the history of cannabis and its potential applications from an expert. Already being legalized in a large part of the United States, marijuana is clearly here to stay as part of our social repertoire, and it's only growing over time. We currently have more questions than answers when it comes to mainstream cannabis. How should it be used? How should it be regulated? What are the risks and what are the benefits? How does it compare to alcohol and other substances? There are no right answers here, only opinions. Listen up as we discuss all things cannabis. Check it out. Hey, Rohan, what's going on, buddy?
What up, my brother Rick?
How's everything, man? Thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
My pleasure, man.
Listen, I'm excited to talk to you about, as you call it, God's plant, marijuana, and all things cannabis.
True.
So we'll delve into your expertise and where you think it's going from here.
Yeah.
Let's start with kind of the obvious question. Do you believe that cannabis, aka herb, should be legalized throughout the United States?
Absolutely, because how does one has the audacity to put limitations on something that God created for the healing of the nation? You know what I'm saying? Meaning you can go out in your backyard and the plant will grow naturally. This is not something man-made or man-created. This is just a natural plant like any other herbs in your backyard. So what's the differentiation between the mint herb and the actual cannabis, as some people call it, the cannabis plant? What's the difference? You know what I mean? They all have their different components to how they're a part of the human DNA and the structural component of man itself from a molecular standpoint. So why wouldn't that be something beneficial to mankind that's there, that we know it's a healing and we know it has medicinal values and medicinal purposes? So why deny us human beings the very thing that God created for us to heal our own self? You know what I'm saying? So of course it should be legal. And that
so for people who don't necessarily have background, what are the different forms of herb and how are they different?
Well, I would say in terms of like herbs in general, the different forms of herb, you have a sativa herb, which is as far as the psychosis side of it, the THC side of it, it's not as high on the THC level. The sativa herb, which is that can fall from a range from, back in the 70s, those things were coming in at 14 and 10 and 12, 16. Nowadays, you can find a sativa between 18 and 23, 24 on the THC side. And then you have the just regular, like the ones they call the OG Kush, right? So the more dominant, the one, that herb is the herb that lifts you high. So what we call it again? Sativa hybrid. What that one the name again? The sativa. What the next one name? Sativa hybrid.
I think that's it. No.
Next one today. Hybrid is the mix, but you have the name slip me. The sativa, and then you have the indica.
Yeah.
So indica now is what we. So good. I have a great story about herbs in general, and being an herb smoker, and not being an educated herb smoker when I was younger. Right. I started to learn about the difference between sativa and indica at like after college, because I wasn't such a avid smoker in college, because I played for the U. But after college and getting into coffee and stuff, my herb was for my work. and I had an office outside of my dad's place in Jamaica. And I remember I elder Rasta man, he used to always come and give me a little jar of herb to smoke. But every time I noticed I would smoke the herb, this was like at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you drink a cup of coffee like I am doing now. And every time I smoke the herb, I notice I'm like by 10:30, I'm like getting a little tired. So I like, why? I'm like, what's happening here? And so when the revolution started in Jamaica in regards to legalization and those things with the herb movement, and the guys were getting more sophisticated, they started to grow their herb in greenhouses and having a more attention to the herb, the plant itself, as far as its development. A brethren's like, yo, Ro, you need to try this. This is a blue stream or one of them kind of strains. And it was actually, I smoked the herb, and I'm gonna tell you what I'm trying to get at here. When I smoked the herb, I found myself like, okay, let's work, I'm bum bum bum. So a couple, like maybe 30 minutes later, the elder Rastaman came in again and he waved to me and said, yo, I brought you something. So I said, wait a minute. Ah, I said, Natty. I said, come here, Natty. Let me ask you something. How you grow this? So yeah, man, them herb are the original strain. Man, we just grow it with, my man, them from Nigger grow them herb. Yeah. But that's when I started to realize that he had an indica strain. And Jamaica, we were more dominant indica back from in the day, because the Rastaman them want a strong herb. So and now it started to click that we as a culture were more indica like type of culture. So indica kind of puts you more in solitude. Indica kind of puts you in more of a mind state within your own self and such, while the sativa now is more of a, like I would say, an activation type of thing. It activates certain part of the brain cells that will now trigger your. I figure you're helping you to um, mobilize your emotions into actuality. So it's like it's good to write a song and smoke some sativa, while
I
it's
hear
good
you.
to smoke indica and meditate. You dig?
Let
Yeah.
me ask you a question. What if we legalize marijuana and you were in charge of regulating it? How
Yeah.
do you think the herb should be regulated? Age limit, amount limit?
Well, it's like cigarette, right? Like whole like tobacco. Like the ancients, they smoked tobacco for medicinal purposes. You dig? Like the ancient, the old Americans, the original American people, tobacco is a medicine. Like if you know some of the ancient man, they talk about the psilocybin, and when they are on psilocybin, it's like they smoke tobacco to take them to certain heights, right? So in general, it's the same procedure. It's left up to a man's discretion. It's like water. It's like how much water should you drink? How when should you drink water? It's like medication from a doctor. The doctor can give you a medication, prescribe you certain amount of things, but he's like, oh, I'll give you a refill. Like they don't know the limitations. No one knows the limitation. That's left up to the man's decision and the man's own discretion of knowing himself. Because remember, again, that plant in itself is a plant that it's a personal relationship. So you have to have within your own self your own discretion, just like in any decision you make in life. When you're making choices for the benefit of yourself, you have to know what you're choosing. You can't A next man shouldn't be able to tell you about you and what your needs are. You know what your needs are. If you want to overindulge in something, the situation in that. Just like eating too much, you're gonna get overweight. If you drink too much, you're gonna get overly, you're gonna become bloated. You're gonna do this, all the things. You drink too much alcohol, you become drunken. So you gotta understand your limitations within yourself. So that's where the grades. That's how you limit that. But in regards to like how would you do that? Of course you have to, certain things have to be noted. Is where you all the descriptions on the package, labeling, explaining the level of the components of the plant, the I mean in regards to how the levels of the THC, what is the actual plant, how it's grown, all those things. The educational side of the plant from the grower should be listed, and so ones that are partaking in something of another guy's product should always have the information to give you all of the positive decisions that you need to know in regards to your limitations and the values that you're going to get from this plant based upon what the actual grower is talking about. You know what I'm saying? So that's how it would go for me.
Now, let me ask you a question about the social stigma, because marijuana used to be uniformly illegal, as you know, in this
Used to
country.
be.
Used to be. Do you feel like we're fighting a social stigma still since it
Well,
was uniformly illegal?
well, yeah, because you have to get into why that stigma became, because like anything else, it's all marketing and blasphemous things and all these different things. So you have to understand, like from the Nixon time and Reagan's time and those guys, Carter's time, and these people that were, when you get into those stigmatic things, you got to understand from the roots of these things, the root and the cause, right? You got to remember when those times prohibition between alcohol and tobacco, when they're trying to regulate that so the industry can become more taxable and more this and more that. Of course, they have to turn people away from a plant that you cannot. I guess you couldn't regulate it like for in terms. So being that you can't regulate it, it becomes competitive to what you are regulating and what you have control over in regards to FDA. So when they came about and started to promote these blasphemous things about the plant itself, yes, it created a different, like, this a whole different view on the plant from the mothers and the guys that are like to dress up in suits and think about, oh, they're so straight edge cut, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't do this, that and the third. And when you start marketing that to the mass media, of course there's going to be a stigma thing that comes about. So the same people that created that, they're little by little now trying to, like, oh, we made a mistake as in regards to decriminalization, in regards to the states now, because what it's state and federal, what the federal guys are smarter than the state guys? No, they just understand, it's a money thing, and it's like, hey, taxation and the values and these things. So all of it's a money thing. It's not nothing to do with the plant itself, because where's the same people that were talking about it were the same people that needed it in behind closed doors. So now that it's more acceptable, those stigmas are going away, because the same guys that they're writing you the prescription now, they're giving you a medicinal card and telling you, hey, you know what, you have this problem, go smoke the herb. Those are the same guys that was fighting against the herb. So they're trying to lift that veil, because they know they're wrong for that, and they know it was an evil thing to do, so that stigma is just within people's mind and consciousness, that the people that started that need to undo that by the way they speak about the herb, and they need to free up the herbs. So that's where that comes from.
Now, speaking of lifting the stigma, I think a lot of that is educating the public regarding the side
Education.
effects of marijuana compared
Well,
to other substances, right? Like,
sure.
tell us tell us marijuana versus something that's legal like alcohol. Like, compare those two.
All right. Alcohol, right? uh, I mean, first of all, depends on the alcohol you're talking about. You're talking about some alcohol that I'm brewing in the back, or something that's done in a factory. Is the alcohol is fermentation, right? So this is just yeast and fermentation is what alcohol really is. And you use the yeast to pull whatever you need from the plant to get that what is it, what fentanyl, what, I don't know, gas. It's like gas. But you get that energy from that, right? But it's but that thing is a little different thing that works on the blood, right? So when you're drinking, them things are messing with your blood. So that starts to mess with your equilibrium and your balance and how you see life and things. Because when you drink, the drink can get into your emotions in regards to anger and lust and these different things. Because if you notice, they call alcohol a spirit. So you gotta be careful, because when you drink alcohol, you start to tap into certain spiritual dimensions that you're not even aware of, and that thing opens up your mind. That's why those guys back in the day, you see, they drink the white rum, and it's a spiritual thing. They blow it around, and they get into a trance. So you got to know what you're doing on them levels, because that's a strong situation, right? because alcohol deals directly with the spirits. So that's the difference. And when you smoke herb, the herb deal with yourself. So you have to understand the difference between the medicines that you're taking, because some people apply alcohol as medicine, for wounds, etc. It's not always something you ingest. So it just depends on your application and how you apply each medicine, and you got to be aware of all things. But for one, alcohol is something that can take you out of yourself and your state of mind, that you can lose your equilibrium. So that's one thing. And then herb, you're always within yourself, so there's a difference. It's an equilibrium perspective.
How do we educate the public? I know you're big into that. I think a lot of the stigma, like we were talking about, was just
Well,
public miseducation.
education comes from self, right? And education is really experimental. So you can't, someone that don't smoke herb can't educate you about herb. A lab guy can't educate you about herb. All he can tell you is numbers. You know what I'm saying? So herbs are experimental things. Like you can't go to a guy that don't know yogi to teach you yoga. You gotta go to a yogi. So you need to go to an herbalist that has practice and have the repetition of the use of the herb, and knows the benefits of the herb and the different levels that these different plants and these different genetics can do for your structure from the cannabis. I can't even say the word. I'm Jamaican. So I mean, can't say cannabinoids. And it can, I say, but we all are built of that, and that type of link to the plant itself. So we need an expert, and an expert is someone that's practiced and tried over and over again. Sorry, an expert is someone that's tried over and over again just actual plants to be able to educate you, a first time user, someone that wants to be educated about what is it that you're trying to get indulge. It's like driving. You dig? A driver, I teach you how to drive. You know what I'm saying? I get someone can read a book and tell you how to drive. You dig?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
The other thing I really want to get into is your company Lion Order. Tell
sure.
us, what was your impetus to start Lion Order and what's your mission?
Well, I know there's a long story, right? And there's many parts to it. There's actualities, there's a mission, and then there's a purpose, right? All right, here's the actuality. The actuality is that I'm an herbalist. I burn herbs. I love my herbs, and this is how we create ideas, and this is how we come up with things and theories, and this is how we go make it through life. And this is how we're able to go within self. I love I just love medicinal plants in general. Like from I'm a kid in Jamaica drinking. If your belly hurts you, they give you bush tea to drink. If you have this, you do this. If you have that, you do that. It's always been the herbs. So during COVID, um, I moved to Florida here because I was living in California where I had access, and certain places I had access. I was living in New York. My friends would always bring me good herbs. But when I moved back to Miami, COVID happened. So one brethren would bring me some herb, and you tell me that, oh, it's this strain, it's from this company, and it's blah blah blah. I said, oh yeah, okay, cool. So I smoked the herb. So I'm like, all right, this is cool. All right, yo, bring me that same herb again. The guy brings me the same exact herb from the same company, the same packaging. I smoke the herb. It's something totally different. So I said to myself, no, wait a second. Are you kidding me? You mean to tell me I'm going to have to be buying herb the rest of my life, not knowing where it comes from, not knowing how it's grown, not having any idea about what is it that I'm ingesting? I'm like, nah, this ain't gonna work for me. I mean, I'm what? No, no, no. For the next 55,000 years, I'm gonna have to be doing this. I'm like, no, I need to create my own. So I said, okay. Now, when you start about creating your own why, there's a why component to it, and then there's the theories behind why you want to create something. So if I'm going to create a product or something, that I'm going to get into the space of an entrepreneur, the business ideology of this getting into, because for me, herb has always been our sacrament. But now, how do you share your sacrament to the masses or to just more than five people cons- persistently? There's a technique to that, right? So my technique was to find growers, find people that have certain genetics that I loved, and I grew up loving herb because of the terpenes. You know, because I'm a coffee guy. You know, I'm into notes. I'm into the flavor, the notes of the plant. Like it tastes. When I drink coffee, I can tell you, oh, that's not there. Nutmeg. I can taste nutmeg. I taste cinnamon. I can taste earthly tones. Now, when I smoke my herb, it's the same thing. But I'm a guy when I'm smoking my herb. Before I smoke my herb, I do a pre-pull. It's pre-pull is when you don't like the spliff. You just pull it and you taste all those notes, you taste all those terps, and you taste the flavor of the herb. So I wanted that because I remember growing up, I used to always take a one pull of my grandmother's spliff, and I was like, oh, okay. And sometime I take a pull, I'm like, what's this? I was like a little confused. Like, how come all the herb tastes different? So I started to realize there's a thing called terps. And I knew that if I was to ever get into this business, I wanted to make my herb more uh, high on the terps, terpenes, like the flavor of the herb. So I met a brethren out of Michigan, and they brought me some really beautiful strains that that some friends of theirs had at home, and they were growing it from a long time ago. And I smoked the herb, and when I smoked the herb, I said, "This is what I want, and I want to make sure I can do this." So then I began into the genetic system where I wanted to, okay, let me cross this genetic with that genetic. So I found a grow in Michigan that was able to bring together my concepts and create my own proprietary genetics and start to grow the herbs that I love. And then the why now, the purpose or whatever I said before, the reasoning for this. I remember growing up as a child because as a Rasta man, I mean, what better structural business that's now legal should I get involved with? I mean, I can't help but to create a business that's like me not like the business, but the business is like myself, and that's herbs, ganja, herb, marijuana, cannabis. So now I said, here's my story. I remember when I was a young boy in the 70s, growing up and having, my father being a superstar musician and being a legendary man in general and being a big man in the community as well as a Rasta man. So during those times in the 70s, there was a movement called the Ethiopian uh, the Coptic Theocracy Rastafari Ethiopian Orthodox Church, right? This is a movement of the Rastafari people that utilize the church as how a part of worship, but also they were the first legal movers and shakers of the cannabis industry back in the 70s, and it's called the Coptic movement, right? So growing up as a little boy in the Hope Road with my dad and all the elders and being fascinated by the elder races and wanted to, like 7 years old, wanted to be a Rasta man at 7 years old, smoking chalice with the elders by sneakingly, not with permission, but doing it because I thought I was grown. I was always inspired by that movement. And the amount of times I used to hear about the Coptics on the radio in the news because obviously you don't have social media, television at that time, so you're hearing about the Coptics and all you could hear about how much land they owned. They were doing maybe $900 million US dollars in Jamaica at the time, and how much they were doing for communities and how much people they were helping. And then in Miami, there was Brother Love living on Miami Beach, and the cop, and they were the first movement in the ganja industry in regards to legalization, not just in Jamaica, but also in here in Florida on Miami Beach. And that was like they had the rights to do this based upon the church as a sacrament. So hundreds and thousands of pounds of herb was going between Jamaica and Miami. So King Clementine now, who is me, the story I'm telling from the brand, which in King Clem is a strain of mine, and I just made a story behind King Clementine. King Clementine now, growing up with Super Duper, who is Bob Marley, my dad, this is my story, was inspired by those guys. Inspired, wow, can't believe that Rasta man is like, it's like oil, it's your own source, that you live on the land and you can provide, oil is coming out of your land. It's like you can grow herb in your backyard and help people and be self-sufficient, become sustainable by something that God given, and they were able to maximize on that and do that. King Clementine, young Ro, me, he was inspired by that. So between like the 70s and 84, King Clementine's father passed away in 1981. Up until that time, he grew up in a place called Spanish Town. Between 81 and 84 now, when 81 happened, King Clem's father passed away. So the day that King Clementine paid respects to his father, himself, his brothers, his mother, everyone, the whole family, grandmother, cousins, sisters, the whole world played tribute to the king, super duper Bob Marley. King Clementine that day is when life changed for King Clementine. So between 81 and 84, when the struggle of life really begun, no leader, no father, growing up without a father because, and the struggle of life begun, King Clem lost his mind. And between 81 and 84, they expelled him out of school. When he came to Miami in 84 now, King Clementine moved into with his grandmother that his dad bought a house for grandma in like 876. But now 84 in the neighborhood that he lived in, King Clem, his dad is superstar, super duper, knew everyone. It happens to be the one of the godmothers of the cannabis movement from the 70s that lived there, and she was still linked up to the guy on Miami Beach, which was a white Rasta man who all say Rastafari. And King Clem now realized that, oh my gosh, this is actually real. These people are real people. It was like Michael Jackson, growing up in Jamaica. You don't have TV, only hear about greatness. So King Clementine became fascinated by that. So between 84 and 88, 89, when the movement collapsed because the government came down on them because they didn't like the fact that they had children around the herbs. So FDA, Child Protective Services, FBI, every IRS, every single government entity suppressed the movement that was happening on Miami Beach, Star Island, with the Coptic movement, the link between Jamaica and Miami, right? So at the time when that happened, King Clementine, his entire idea, he says, you know what? All he wanted to become is a lawyer. So he wanted to fight to defend the Rastamen that were wrongfully persecuted for using the plant as their life base, as their sustainability, as their what would suffice their lives. So all he wanted to do was go to college and become a lawyer and fight these guys. Well, at the time, remember I told you King Clem dad passed away in 81. So by the time now, everything on King Clem's family sides was seized. They wanted to take away the house that he lived in because there was a trust, but there was no will. So the estate, whoever controlled at the time, wanted to sell the rights of the houses, everything of King Clem's father. But being that King Clem lived in the house as a beneficiary, they could not sell the property. So then all they had to survive off of was $99 that King Clem was getting from his father, which was a social security check, right? He was going to elementary school because he came here young age. Then junior high school, then he learned the game of football because he needed to get to college. He was a soccer player, but he couldn't get to college because they didn't give away scholarships in soccer at the time. King Clem learned the game of football. He got a scholarship to the University of Miami. Now he's at the University of Miami. He shaved his head. He got into the game and he became a football star. While he's in school, a brethren comes up to King Clementine because, he's a star. He says, yo, aren't you the son of Super Duper, Bob Marley? Aren't you the son of Super Duper? It's King Clementine. At the time, he's Clementine. He said, yeah, man. He says, do you know my dad was great friends with your dad, and my dad was part of that Coptic movement. King Clem said, what? He says, yeah. They have shipped their movement since now to Michigan. And herb has become legal, and the government is starting to release all the old prisoners. Right away, King Clementine was like, wait a minute. So my whole journey in life was to free these guys. And now they're being freed. Right away, King Clementine now began to say, wow, it's time now to learn. King Clement said, I want to go up to Michigan and see the operation. When he gets to Michigan, he saw that herb now was again industrialized. And the government was now given license and made this legal. King Clem said, you know what? It's time to give up on football. He gave up on football because he wanted to be an NFL player. His dream was becoming a lawyer, and he wanted to be a star. He got an injury in this junior season. He gave up on football. He started to take on Rastafari. King Clem said, well, if I got to get into this business, first I got to become a king, a man, King Clem flies to Ethiopia, goes and studies in monasteries, learn about his roots as Rastafari, so he can be this man in order to make things the way he is and not compromise himself through spirituality. He gets and gains his legacy now by going to what his father spoke about. King Clem said, "You know what? I can't talk about it. I have to live it. I need to experience it myself." King Clem flies to Ethiopia, lives in Ethiopia. While he's there, the monks, being based upon his liberty, crowned him king. So now he's King Clementine. He flies back to Jamaica. His dad, back in the 70s, had a record shop on Orange Street. Orange Street is a strange name. All these names are strange names. And on that Orange Street, King Clem father had a record shop, and the record shop was called Rockers or whatever it's called back in the day. And in the early times, they sold record out the front door and herb out the back door. Based upon digital music and the movement of music now, record sales were started to go down because no one was buying vinyls anymore. So the shop was kind of getting dilapidated. King Clem decided that, you know what? He went back to Jamaica, started farming, and got his license and turned his father's record shop into a dispensary, which he called it the Cake Shop. He then linked up with one of the old time growers and found one of his sons. And his son, his name is Dreddy. He said, "Yo, Dreddy, we need to recombat strain again. That strain that we used to smoke back in the day, that Super Duper used to smoke." And Dreddy said, "Yeah, which one?" Island Sunshine. Dreddy starts to grow the Island Sunshine. So King Clem started to develop his movement, all his crew, to be able to become the real entrepreneur and re-industrialize the plant so he can do what the Coptics did in the 70s. He can now utilize this plant again, not only for its medicinal purposes, but for the financial gains, industrialization, sustainability, and building and helping communities by utilizing this plant to generate income, not only for his family, but for others. And that's why King Clem started Line Order, the business.
Amazing.
Yes,
Amazing. And for
that's
those
just a
people who,
story. That's a story I created because it's a true story, and the story starts about the youth of Jamaica because a lot of us go through a lot of trauma. Because in the 70s, as you know, a lot of Jamaicans, we have parents very young age, and we end up being raised by grandparents because your parents are young and they're trying to, like, my father passed away when he was 36. And my mother had me when she was 15, 16. So you got to understand that in those days, it's young and you're raised no parents in the home, it's grandparent. The grandparents are working, and kids in those days, you had to like survive. You know, part of the survival was taking public transportation to school, having $6, and have to being able to budget that $6 at the age of like 8, 9, 10, from Spanish Town getting to Kingston, and being able to have out of that $6 having your bus fare, within the $6 having lunch money, and trying to buy a snack and having bus fare to go home. So that was the struggle, and King Clem hated that. So he didn't like the fact that he went to a private school, and he lived so far away. So he kind of grew up with this mentality that he was lesser than because of being ashamed of his way he was raised and being the son of a king. So King Clem always had this personality that like a Cinderella, the prince that's a pauper kind of personality. But mainly all Jamaican, because the gift in life is life itself, and you have to become someone. And all the things that how you're raised and how you're brought up is what makes you who you are today. So King Clem was a very ashamed of his past, because of how he was raised, and with a father with such high status. King Clem never wanted to embarrass his family just because of how he was raised. So a lot of young youth in Jamaica have this problem about their pride and their ego, and it's time to let go of that. And part of that whole story is the King Clementine story of how the pauper that's a prince became a king. And that's the King Clementine story, which is Line Order, the cannabis story of of the brand, sir.
I mean, it's an awesome story. And I want to get into you as a person because
Mm.
for people who maybe don't know, I mean, you've had an unbelievable career. You graduated from the University of Miami. You played professional football.
Well,
You're
let's be clear. I'm graduating.
graduating. Okay, there you go.
The
It's
only,
an
the only
active.
document I have is that one, which is His Majesty, and this one.
Well, there you go. You've started several companies and you've been a father and you've raised highly successful
Entrepreneur,
children.
yes, I.
What What drives you on a daily basis? What gets you up in the morning? What motivates you to be so successful?
What motivates me to be so successful? Hmm. I figure just being alive, you know? I figure that I figured that after getting rid of trauma is just feeling sorry for yourself. Trauma is living in the past, living in your memories, living in your failures, you know? And your failures are just part of your success. So once I was able to rid failure in the mind because I'm existing positively. Once I was able to rid that, and I'm telling you the truth, psilocybin helped me to clear that up because being able to accept oneself in the present moment and being able to understand that everything that one sees, man created it with these faculties, their hand, mouth, ears, eyes, all the five senses, all the movements of life. That's what you use to create, you know. And once you realize that you're gifted with all those things to create, and that every man was once a baby, I started to understand that, hell, listen, baby is not a term meaning, oh, you just came out of your mother's womb. Baby in regards to your learning. Because we're ancient spirits. Our spirit can, spirit is ever living. The energy is ever living, you know what I mean? God is omnipresent, omnipotent. So your energy was already here spiritually. So you're learning physicalities. You're learning how to utilize your faculties and how to mold like clay, how to make a plate out of mud. You're learning that, but you can't just do that by looking at that. You have to take the clay, you have to mold it, and the mold that you're going to make of this clay comes out of your own thoughts, right? Your own reality and your own imagination, because no one can imagination for you. No one can formulate for you with your hands. So it's unique. It may look like something, but it's still your own identity. So once you realize that anything that's manifested in creation came through man, who was once you, who fucking never knew how to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 either, who never, once you know that the mechanic was once an apprentice, once you know Carpenter wasn't driving a hammer at the age of 3, he was driving a hammer at the age of 20 the first time, and now he's a master carpenter. He's master at carpentry. That's it. So I figured that out, and it helped. It's a part of the cure of the trauma by living in your failures, which is the past, because you can nothing do nothing about it. I mean, it's a failure. It's a success. Whatever it is, you can make it whatever you want in your own mind. Your failures can be a learning lesson. Your failures can be something that you went through. Your failure can be an experience. So you can create whatever you want in your mind from whatever existed in the past. So if you can now utilize that as a lesson, as that book that you're writing, that you can tell your story of your today, that's the magic. So I was able to get to that state and that state of mind by just, plant medicine and them thing that. So that's, I think it gave me a lot of my directives, and my directives that when I wake up in the morning, what am I going to create? What did I dream about? How can I make my dream a reality? And that's what the magic is.
Now, you mentioned your father. Obviously, everyone knows your father. He's a worldwide legend. How has his legacy motivated you?
Well, being that you have been a son all your life, and as a father, what motivates you is the discipline and the principles of your father, the ways of your father, which is Rastafari ways, which is the teachings of Rastafari. Learning that there's a foundation of the principles, and your father didn't make these principles up. These principles came through a divine order, and the practice of those principles, we can find that in a physical manner through Haile Selassie the First, or King, Empress Menen, or Queen, in regards to our behavior. Because it's a behavioral pattern, right? It's behavior. It's how you behave as a human being. So those behaviors come from those principles, and those principles have a root. So once you're able to tap into the root of your father's principles, you realize that these things come from a generation upon generation upon generation upon time, and the time and the generation started from a divine perspective. So once you realize that what it is really wholeness, And the key to life is becoming whole within the ether, within your spirit, soul, and your consciousness and your physicality. That's the magic. So those are the things that we try to tap into based upon how we see our father movement, how he lives, how he speaks, and how he's able to maintain that type of behavior throughout life. It's because of the root, Rastafari.
What do you want your legacy to be? How do you want people to remember Rohan Marley?
I want them to remember Rohan Marley as the fulfillment of prophecy, a legacy. A legacy is the building upon the foundation that you're. Legacy is like, I want to be remembered as a son of. Yeah,
And build from there. And
yeah.
I think, the important message that your family has always been so influential through an advocacy of peace and love. That was your father's biggest message. What advice would you give anyone listening to this podcast, a young kid that wants to make a difference in the world?
Well, I'll say to a young kid, first you must know what truth is, because to know what truth is, then you start to understand what is peace and love. Because peace and love starts within the truth of self. So one have to really understand the purpose in life, and what is your main purpose here in life? What are you here for on earth? What is, like, you gotta think about it, man. Like, what were you given as a child? What were you given? The person that dealt with you when you came out of your mother's womb, what were you given? So if you can remember what you were given, you have to give what you were given. So the first thing is remember what you were given as a youth. And that was love, care. Someone fed your ass. Someone changed your goddamn pampers, your diaper, your nappy. So you have to find humility. And I remember that one time you used to shit on your fucking self. You used to piss on yourself. You used to spit up on yourself. And remember that shit. And remember that someone looked after you. And remember those days when you couldn't fucking walk. Someone had to pick you up when you fell down. You remember that. And you start to develop humility and understanding that you have to do the same. And that's what you have to remember. Remember that you're once a fucking rugrat.
It's a beautiful message of peace and love. And wrapping up the interview, because I know you're super busy, but
Oh man, I have time for you. So whenever
oh,
you want.
I appreciate that, man. But thanks for joining us. I loved your message. Amazing new company, Lion Order, for people who don't know.
And Marley
Definitely check it
Coffee.
out.
Don't forget about these guys.
Oh, Marley Coffee. Yeah,
Yeah.
just give us a 5-minute blurb on Marley Coffee. I didn't think we'd have time to talk about it, but it's a great brand.
Well, Marley Coffee is a company that I started in 1999. And when I say 1999, I remember Miss Lauren Hill, we have children together, and she said to me one day, hey man, what do you do? And at the time, I was just a house husband because I just left University of Miami. I needed to figure out life. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I thought I was going to be an athlete. I wanted to so I had to figure out life. A piece of property came available in the family, and the brethren told me that it belongs in the Marley family, and I had $200,000. The land was going for $200,000. I bought the land. When I bought the land, I asked the community, what's the community known for? They told me coffee. I asked them if they knew anything about coffee. They said yes, they've been farming coffee all their lives. So I shook their hand and told them that we're in the coffee business. Because when I got to that community, I realized that land, I cannot take that land nowhere with me. That land's going to be in that community for the rest of my life, and it's going to be in the community all of their lives because it's their community. And all I realized that I was just a part of the community, and I was only the stewards of the land and how I can help it become more sustainable and create something for the community to live from and give them a sustainable life. And at the time, learn about what is sustainability. So Marley Coffee began like that. I began to learn how to farm from seed to cup, buying my seedlings, changing over the concept of how to do farming because I'm a Rasta man. Like I told you, I wanted the business to be like me, not me like the business. So I'm a Rasta man. So I like to eat Aita, which is organic. So my first things to that community was you can't use any chemicals on my land. So I broke their traditional way of thinking. Oh, Mr. Marley, if you don't use this chemical, you're going to kill your yielding. I said, listen to me. Let me tell you something. First of all, I'm smarter than you think because I know the guy that has 6,000 acres down the street that used chemicals, and the plant of his life lasted only 6 years, and now all his root system have became rotten because he killed the root system with the chemicals. And the first thing to that is, listen, I'm not stupid here. if I'm getting into some type of business here, why would I get into a business that's going to devalue your life while you're trying to enhance my life? I don't want to be the guy that comes into the community. Oh, Mr. Marley, because we spray so much around that Mr. Man, his lungs is no longer good. He's getting this disease and he's getting from me. I don't want that fucking problem. I don't want that problem. Just just as the first fucking rule. I don't want those fucking problems where I'm responsible for your ailments. Get the fuck out of here. I came here to help. Why the fuck is it that my situation is depreciating your situation? If we're not appreciative of each other, it don't work. So that was my first instance. Then after that, not having the capacity to build a business with only 52 acres, I had to figure it out. So I went to Ethiopia. While I'm in Ethiopia, the monk sends me to a monastery. The monastery, they're growing and processing coffee. I realized, oh my gosh, if the monastery can process and build a coffee business, I can, because they needed to have their resources to also help the poor people, the priests, the monks, and everything. So once upon a time, they said that Rastafari people didn't drink coffee because of the caffeine or whatever. So my question was to the monks, why do you guys have coffee then? He told me, hey, these guys need this, these guys need that. Exactly. I'm going to Addis Ababa. I hear on the radio that Ethiopian government is banning Starbucks from buying coffee. I said, what? Yeah, because at the time Starbucks wanted to own the name Yugoslavia, which is a region in Ethiopia. You can't own a city's name and trademark it. They said no. And also Ethiopia wanted to build a commodity system where they put their coffee on the trade line and balance out their situation, because at the time this guy was buying coffee at 1 birr, this one at 10 birr, so it was unstable. So I said to myself, wait a minute, the biggest coffee company in the world don't own a coffee farm? I own a coffee farm. I called this guy that was interested in investing $100,000 into me to help me out, because at the time my family, I was failing at things, as you know, failing meaning you ain't making no money, man. You're losing money. So I didn't want to stress my family about investments anymore. So brethren wanted to invest $100,000. His name was Shane. I called Shane on the phone from Ethiopia. This time I moved to live in Ethiopia. That's why I was telling you about the King Clementine, the same guy. This time I moved to Ethiopia and I called the guy on the phone. I said, hey, man, do you know who my father is? He says, yes, Bob Marley. I said, yes. And do you know that my father is a universal man? He says, yes, Rohan. I said, do you know that I am also universal? He says, Rohan, what the fuck are you trying to say? I said, do you know that coffee is universal? Here's what we're going to do. I say, screw having a Jamaican company. I'm going to build a coffee company, and I'm going to source coffee from the birthplace of Rastafari, the birthplace of civilization, the birthplace of Haile Selassie the First, and most importantly, the birthplace of coffee. And then I'm going to name my coffee based upon the music of my father, what we own. Being that Ethiopia is the birthplace of civilization, coffee in general, I named that coffee strain One Love. I name my espresso Lively Up. I name my dark roast Buffalo Soldier. I name my Jamaican blend Smile Jamaica. These are all song names. I name my decaf Simmer Down. So, and then I started to go in front of Whole Foods and cut my coffee. Hi, hello, my name is Rohan Marley. I'm starting a new coffee company. Would you like to try a cup of my coffee? My dad's Bob, and of course, you gotta use on your foundation. So it's hard for someone just out of nowhere to know who you are. So I just had to bring awareness. Hi, I'm Bob Marley's son, Rohan Marley. So I had to bring awareness instantly to the marketplace, to the consumer that maybe love my dad's music, but not so much aware that his son has a coffee company. So I had to let them know, hey man, this is of the legacy that you love so much. Here I am, man. Support me too. That's why I did that, and that's how I was able to start that. And I took that from like $3,000 a year to a proper business. Now it's worldwide. It's the number one coffee in Chile. We have distribution all over America now through Amazon, which is something I'm trying to revamp. But overall, Chile's our best market. Jamaica, the Caribbean. We have some locations out in the UK in the wholesale side. But if you want to get a good experience of Marley Coffee, MarleyCoffeeChile.com is a beautiful way to see what I've done and what the people of Chile has developed from just this imagination.
I'll
That's
tell
a
you,
little story on Marley Coffee, man.
I mean, Rohan, it was great talking to you. I think the
Good.
take home points are that not only have you made your father proud, but you formed your own legacy, right? All these different companies that you're forming, everything you've achieved, that's your own trail, that's your own legacy. And I think
One
kudos to
day to
you
day.
for
True.
branching out.
Thank you, man.
It was an awesome interview. Would love to talk some more in the future, man.
Anytime, Doc. Anytime.
Dude, you're
Anytime.
the man, all right? You have an awesome day.